My brothers, have you ever chased something that kept slipping further away the closer you got? It's like trying to hug fog, mysterious, cold, yet somehow irresistible. Now, let me ask you something that might sting a little. Why do some men fall hardest for the ones who give them the least? Pause and think. Today, we're diving into a truth many fear to face: why men become addicted to women who detach emotionally. And no, this isn't a rom-com analysis. It's real, raw, and happening silently in the hearts of men everywhere. At first, it feels like excitement, like a test of manhood. Can I win her over? But beneath that thrill hides a deeper struggle, one that touches the soul. Don't worry, we're not here to blame or shame. This journey will awaken you. But hold on, before you think you know the ending, there's a twist coming that might just flip everything you believe about love and self-worth on its head. It's funny, if I told you a man was chasing something that constantly rejected him, gave him mixed signals, and kept him emotionally starved, you'd probably shake your head and say, that guy needs help. But what if I told you that same man believes he's in love? What if I told you he's convinced this pursuit is noble, romantic, even destined? That's the power of challenge and mystery, and it's no laughing matter when your heart is the one being played. The human mind is wired to solve puzzles. We chase after what feels uncertain, not because it's good for us, but because it feels like a test we need to pass. And when that challenge comes in the form of a woman who pulls away just enough to stay desirable but never close enough to offer emotional safety, it becomes a game of the soul, a dangerous game. Let me ask you something. Have you ever tried to hold water in your hands? The tighter you grip, the faster it slips away. That's what it feels like for many men who are hooked on emotionally detached women. She's there, but not quite. Available, but unavailable. You get a smile, a glance, a moment of connection, and then silence, distance. And that distance doesn't repel you. It pulls you in like gravity. Why? Because your mind frames it as a challenge to overcome. You begin to believe that if you try just a little harder, if you say the right words, show more patience, prove your worth, you'll unlock her heart. You'll win. But here's where it gets dangerous. The moment you tie your value to someone else's emotional availability, you're not chasing love anymore. You're chasing validation. And validation is a never-ending race on a track that moves as you run. This isn't about weakness, it's about wiring. Men are conditioned to conquer, to solve problems, to win. And when faced with emotional detachment, their instincts turn the person in front of them into a mission. She's not just a woman anymore, she's a symbol of something deeper: acceptance, recognition, proof that he's enough. And when she pulls back, it's like losing ground in a battle. You don't retreat, you charge harder. The heartbreak doesn't make you stop. It fuels the pursuit. And the mystery? Oh, that's the fuel. The less she reveals, the more your mind fills in the blanks. You romanticize her. You create a fantasy version of her that might not even exist. You start to think, maybe she's just guarded. Maybe she's been hurt. Maybe I can fix it. Ever told yourself that? That maybe you're the exception to her rule? Let's pause for a second. Isn't it strange that in a world where connection is a fingertip away, emotional connection feels like a luxury? And for many men, that luxury is most alluring when it's withheld. It's not the freely given affection that keeps them up at night. It's the cold shoulder, the unread message, the unanswered question that loops in their mind like a haunting melody. The unknown becomes more intoxicating than the known. And yet, we rarely stop to ask, is this love or is this obsession with the unsolved? Here's where it gets uncomfortable. Deep down, many men believe that if they can earn her love, they will finally be worthy of love itself. That's not romance, that's bondage. But here's the twist most never see coming. Emotional detachment often isn't about being hard to get. Sometimes it's a shield. A woman who is emotionally distant may not be playing a game. She may be protecting wounds she never tells anyone about. She's not challenging you on purpose. She's surviving the only way she knows how. But in trying to break through her walls, many men ignore their own. They don't ask themselves, why do I feel more attracted to someone who keeps me emotionally hungry? Because to face that question is to confront a fear few want to admit, the fear of being seen fully and still not being enough. At this point, you might wonder, so what's the answer? Do we avoid mystery altogether? Do we only pursue the people who offer us 100% emotional clarity from day one? That sounds safe, but also strangely flat, predictable. See, it's not that challenge and mystery are bad. They're not. They're part of the dance of connection. But when mystery becomes confusion and challenge becomes chaos, you're no longer dancing, you're chasing a ghost. And ghosts don't love back. There's something else, though, something deeper. Why do men ignore women who show genuine affection but fall headfirst for those who pull away? Could it be that they equate ease with boredom? That emotional safety feels unfamiliar, maybe even suspicious? That somewhere along the way they learn to confuse peace with passivity and drama with passion? Now that's a scary realization, but if that's the case, what does that say about the kind of love we're conditioned to seek? And here's another question. What happens when you finally win her over? When she lets you in, what then? Will the magic disappear? Will the pursuit feel complete, or will it feel like you've climbed a mountain only to find there's nothing at the top but your own reflection? Because sometimes it's not her emotional distance you're addicted to, it's the version of yourself you become when trying to reach her. A version that feels alive, determined, purposeful. But if that identity only exists in the pursuit, what happens to you when the chase ends? Let me ask you a question that might catch you off guard. How much of what you call love is really just the need to be seen, to be chosen, to be enough for someone who keeps slipping out of reach? Sit with that for a second, because for many men, the truth is not that they're in love with her, but that they're obsessed with what her approval represents. This is the hidden force behind why so many men get addicted to emotionally detached women. It's not just about her, it's about the validation they're chasing through her. And the more distant she is, the more valuable her attention becomes. Like a scarce resource, her affection feels like a prize to be earned, not a connection to be shared. Now, here's where it gets tricky. Most men don't even realize this dynamic is happening. They think they're simply drawn to her mystery, her independence, maybe even her high standards. But underneath that surface level logic is something more primal, validation seeking. And this isn't weak, it's human. Every one of us wants to be seen. We want to feel like we matter. And when someone gives us just enough attention to spark hope, but not enough to feel secure, we start working overtime to earn what should have been freely given. That's when the addiction begins, not to the person, but to the possibility of finally feeling worthy. Let's make it real. Imagine a woman who only opens up when you're pulling away, or one who praises you one day, then grows cold the next. You tell yourself she's complicated, that you need to be patient, that if you just love her harder, she'll come around. But what you're really doing is turning her affection into a scoreboard. Every compliment becomes a point, every unanswered message becomes a loss, and the game never ends. Why? Because it's not really about her, it's about how you feel about yourself in her presence. When she validates you, you feel alive. When she withdraws, you feel invisible, and that emotional roller coaster becomes your new normal. Have you ever noticed how people crave the approval of the ones who give them the least? Think about it. If 10 people tell you you're amazing and one person ignores you, where does your mind go? To the one? To the silence? To the absence? That's the curse of conditional validation. It teaches you to equate love with effort and self-worth with results. You begin to believe that being chosen by someone hard to please means you're finally enough. But let me ask you something uncomfortable. Why does someone else's opinion have so much power over your sense of value? Why does her coldness make you try harder instead of walk away? Here's the cliff many fall off. They assume that once they finally win her over, the wound will be healed. That when she finally opens up, gives in, says yes, the years of proving and pleasing will suddenly feel worth it. But what if I told you that validation doesn't cure emptiness? It only distracts from it. That when your worth is built on someone else's response, you never actually feel secure, you just feel temporarily relieved. And relief isn't the same as love, it's a pause in the pain, not the end of it. You see, validation seekers aren't just chasing affection, they're running from rejection. But rejection isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, a delay in response, a shift in tone, a look that says, "You're not enough today." And that's when the panic sets in. Let's pause here because maybe this is sounding too familiar. Maybe you're thinking, but I've been that guy. I've chased, I've waited, I've hoped. You're not alone. This pattern is widespread because it preys on one of the deepest human fears, the fear of not being lovable unless you perform, unless you please, unless you achieve. And when a woman is emotionally detached, she becomes the mirror to that fear. Her approval isn't steady, it's scattered. Her love isn't consistent, it's conditional. And that activates a part of you that believes love must be earned, not received. Now, here's something you won't hear often. Many men addicted to emotionally unavailable women aren't hopeless romantics. They're wounded warriors, men who never truly felt seen by their fathers, men who felt invisible in their youth, men who learned early on that being good enough was tied to performance, achievement, sacrifice. And so now, as adults, they repeat that same script in relationships. They chase the emotionally distant because it feels familiar. It feels like home, not the kind of home that comforts, but the kind of home that demands. Prove yourself or be forgotten. That's not love. That's a trauma loop disguised as intimacy. But the most dangerous part, the longer you chase validation from someone who withholds it, the more you begin to shrink your own self image. You stop asking, "Do I want this connection?" and start asking, "What else do I have to do to be chosen?" You give more than you should. You excuse behavior that crosses your boundaries. You start to tolerate silence, confusion, even manipulation because somewhere deep inside you believe the reward is coming. That if you just hang on a little longer, she'll finally love you the way you need to be loved. But what if that day never comes? What if the validation you're starving for isn't in her hands, but buried deep inside the parts of you you've ignored? Think about this. What if the version of love you're chasing was never love at all, but emotional survival? What if being ignored felt thrilling only because it mirrored an old wound you never named? And what if you could rewrite that story? Not by being chosen, but by choosing yourself before anyone else does? And yet, that's the part most men struggle to accept, choosing yourself. It sounds empowering on paper, but when you've built your identity around being accepted by someone else, self worth feels like a foreign language because deep down there's this lingering belief. If she picks me, it means I matter. But validation rooted in someone else's approval will never lead to peace. It leads to dependency. It traps you in a cycle where your confidence spikes when she smiles and crashes when she turns away. That's not strength, that's emotional gambling, and every text, every compliment, every breadcrumb becomes a bet, but the house always wins. Let's reset for a moment. Imagine you're walking through a desert, thirsty, exhausted, and in the distance you see an oasis. You run toward it, only to find it's a mirage. It disappears the closer you get. Now ask yourself, how many times have you chased a connection like that? How many times have you confused emotional starvation for chemistry? You thought the intensity meant it was real, but what if the spark was just anxiety disguised as desire? What if the rush wasn't attraction, but desperation for validation you've never given yourself? Here's something else to consider. When someone withholds love, they gain power. Not necessarily intentionally, but it happens. And the one chasing feels smaller and smaller with each unanswered question, each vague response, each fleeting moment of closeness, followed by cold withdrawal. It trains your mind to see their affection as something rare, and your heart begins to associate uncertainty with value. It's like emotional scarcity. Whatever's rare must be precious. But that logic is flawed. Scarcity doesn't make something healthy, it just makes it harder to leave. And then comes the comparison trap. You start wondering, why is she open with others, but guarded with me? What did I do wrong? How do I fix this? You turn inward and start rewiring your behavior, suppressing your needs, walking on eggshells, all for the chance of receiving what should be natural, emotional presence. And every time she offers a glimpse of vulnerability, your heart leaps. That tiny drop of affection feels like rain after a drought. but it's not enough. It never is. Because you're not in a relationship, you're in an emotional negotiation, constantly bargaining with your self esteem. Let's go deeper. Validation seeking often begins long before romantic relationships enter the picture. It's built in childhood, maybe through a parent who was emotionally unavailable, inconsistent, or only gave praise when you achieved something. Over time, this conditions you to link love with effort and silence with failure. So, fast forward to adulthood, and what kind of love feels normal? The kind you have to work for, the kind that keeps you guessing. That's why emotionally detached women often feel magnetic, because they mirror a wound that feels familiar. But here's the haunting part: familiarity is not safety, it's just repetition. And repetition doesn't heal you, it just deepens the scar. And if we're honest, this pattern doesn't just affect your romantic life. It bleeds into your confidence, your focus, your purpose. You start to build your day around how she responds or doesn't. You question your worth every time the silence stretches too long. You adjust who you are just to get a reaction, any reaction. You lose yourself while trying to earn someone else. And the longer you stay in that space, the more your self worth becomes entangled with someone else's moods and boundaries. That's not connection, that's captivity. But what's even more alarming is how the chase becomes the identity. You begin to need the struggle because the fight gives you purpose. If the relationship were suddenly stable, would you even know what to do with it? For some men, calm feels boring because they've never experienced love without pain, so they confuse intensity for intimacy. But intensity burns out. It doesn't build. You don't build homes in firestorms. You run from them.